Bonjour, je m'appelle Rachel Sterne et je suis très heureuse de parler à vous aujourd'hui. Je suis désolée, mais je vais arrêter de parler français maintenant parce que je ne peux pas continuer. Mais je suis très heureuse et je veux bien dire merci beaucoup. So my name is Rachel Sterne. I'm the city's Chief Digital Officer and very happy today to speak, I believe, just a little bit for 15 minutes about the city's digital roadmap, how we've structured this, and then would be happy to speak in question and answer for about 30 minutes. And if you have questions, I believe I can hear you, so feel free to let me know, and at the end we can discuss. So just to give a bit of background, NYC Digital is part of the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. It was founded in 2010, but we really began in 2011. And Mayor Bloomberg created the office because he felt that the way that New Yorkers communicate and share information is changing, and in order for us to have a relevant, responsive, effective government, we need to also have a very effective digital strategy. We initially had 4 core pillars to the digital roadmap, but we've actually added a 5th. And I will speak very briefly about those initiatives in just a moment. So the 5 areas are that we introduced. We added another one last year, education, which was originally part of access, are access, education, open government, engagement, and industry. And of course, all of this is online at nyc.gov/digital if you would like more information. So first, access, which is really infrastructure. We know that in order for any of our digital strategy to be effective, we need to have the ability for all New Yorkers to find a way to connect and get online. And there is a great deal of connectivity in New York City. We're very happy that we have about 98% access to residential areas in New York City, but we also know that in areas of lower income housing, that number drops to about 50 or 60% adoption. So we've invested in a few ways. One program that's been very helpful is the Broadband Technologies Opportunity Program, which is a federally funded program that has helped us to serve over 300,000 New Yorkers from low-income households, everything from 6th graders to their family members up through senior citizens who we're helping to introduce new ways for them to get online. And there is also free Wi-Fi in every library in New York City, and we're experimenting with more and more ways to connect people outside of the home as well. Wi-Fi in public spaces is one of the most frequently requested digital elements that we hear from the public. So today we have over 26 parks that provide free Wi-Fi through a partnership that we have with AT&T, and that will expand to reach about 40 total over the next couple of years. And we've also experimented with a few pilots, such as turning our payphone kiosks into Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the city. So the next step up from the foundation of infrastructure is making sure that once you're able to get online, that you know what to do in order to be successful academically and professionally and in your society communications beyond that point. And that's why education is really crucial for us as well. To that end, the city is making a number of investments led by Mayor Bloomberg, who himself has an engineering background and who is a technologist and an entrepreneur, to really prepare our students for the future workforce. And we hear time and time again from our tech sector representatives that labor and a very skilled talent pool is the most crucial thing to their growth. So we have introduced earlier this year, or earlier in the academic year, the Academy for Software Engineering, which is a high school that, in addition to the core curriculum, teaches software engineering. And on the board of that school, we have Google and Facebook contributing to make sure that the curriculum really is relevant to what the companies are looking for. In addition to that, the city created the NYC Applied Sciences Initiative, which was basically an opportunity to create an additional world-class engineering facility in New York City. At the time, we didn't know what the response would be, but we had a really fantastic response. Over 27 very prominent institutions were interested in expanding in New York City, and today we have 3 partnerships that have been announced as a result of that, including the premier and the first one that we announced, which was Cornell Technion, and the city provided $100 million in resources as part of that partnership. At its height, the Cornell Technion Institute will be training PhD students in engineering topics. It will have a close relationship with the tech sector, which they're developing right now, and it will add another 2,000 postgraduate engineers to New York City's economy, which is something we really hope will fuel our growth to get to the next level. And this is a mock-up of what that space will look like on Roosevelt Island, which is actually very close to us right now, close to the UN. So the next step, after we have the foundation of infrastructure, we have people who have the ability to participate in that in the information economy and ecosystem. And I should also note that part of education is also the basics. So there are classes where you can learn about email. There's a class called Facebook for Seniors that sells out every time at the libraries. So there are classes about word processing and various basic functions such as applying for a job in all the schools. But the next step after education is open government. And for us, open government really comes down to transparency, data, and innovation. And we feel much like large tech organizations such as Facebook and Twitter and Google, that if we are able to provide the resources that help us run as a city to the public, to third parties, and to the tech sector, private sector representatives, we're able to create better solutions together than perhaps we could do on our own. So today the city has over 1,100 open data sets available to the public, and it is everything from the location of Wi-Fi hotspots, which is one of our most desired data sets, to the police and fire response times per every district throughout New York City, as well as the test scores of graduating high school seniors. In the U.S., the SAT is very popular. It's like the ACT, how they vary district to district. The mayor is a very strong proponent of transparency, and the legislation that underlies this program is some of the most progressive in the United States. By the year 2018, it's required that all city data, unless it is confidential, must be made available to the public, not only digitally, but in a machine-readable format so that a software application can interact with it. As a couple examples, in order to really get a lot out of our open data, it's one thing to put it out there, but we think it's really important for us to also create strategic ways and guidance to third parties about what kind of tools we need. So we hold what are called hackathons. I don't know if you're familiar with these. They're good, they're not bad. A hackathon is basically a collaborative community event for computer developers and designers where they get together and there's a competition essentially, or a challenge to solve a common problem. And by forcing everyone to find a solution within 48 hours, usually it's over the course of a weekend, people are sort of compelled to address challenges in a new way from a fresh perspective. And it's been very helpful for us. We've done this for imagining the future of our website, nyc.gov, as well as for sustainability related apps through Reinvent Green, and most recently through Reinvent Payphone's Design Challenge, where we encourage the public to suggest their ideas for the future of New York City's payphones. And then on the right here in this image, we have an image of coming back. One of the most popular data sets that the city does offer to the public is the 311 request map. So you can actually see, we update this every day, what the top requests are across the city of New York when they've been resolved. So it's another step in having as much transparency as we possibly can. So the next step after that level of open government, where we are using the education and infrastructure to collaboratively share data and come up with solutions that can help to better serve New Yorkers, is engagement. And this is really where my office does a lot of our execution day to day, and that is in engaging the city's digital audience. And New Yorkers are incredibly digitally savvy. They represent the largest user group of every major social media platform in the United States, because we like to communicate and we're the largest city, obviously. And so we're constantly looking at ways to come to where New Yorkers live online. Our digital strategy is always based on metrics and data and finding out where people are already communicating online, so that we create a user-centric strategy of communication and engagement around their needs. So instead of forcing them to always come to our website, for example, we try wherever possible to come to them and to translate our news and our updates into a format that's very accessible and engaging. Today we reach over 6.3 million individuals every month. That's about 3 million on social media and 3 million on nyc.gov, the city's website. And our social media audience has doubled over the past year. The city has over 300 social media channels, but we also offer a sort of umbrella account at nyc.gov where they can get a sense of, at a glance, everything going on across the city. And finally, we have industry. So theoretically, if we are investing in those first 4 building blocks of a digital city, through our strategy to support a strong tech industry in New York, we're really cultivating the conditions necessary for that to happen. It's a very exciting time for tech in New York City. We've seen a phenomenal amount of growth over the past few years, and even the numbers that are noted here on this slide, which we introduced with the most recent digital roadmap, have increased, which we're very happy about. So last year there were over $3.8 billion worth of tech sector acquisitions and exits, which really shows that there's a lot of interest in the space. In addition to that, we've seen that jobs continue to increase in the sector. We've had about 30% increase year over year in the number of jobs in the tech sector. And recently, the job search website dice.com announced that there are more IT jobs in New York City than in anywhere else in the country, and that includes Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and the Bay Area, which speaks to the fact that New York City has many large industries that have traditionally been very prominent here, such as real estate, finance, fashion, media, and as all of those sectors become more digital and embrace technology, we're just going to see more and more innovation across those sectors and then specific to the tech sector as well. In order to make it clear to the world and to New Yorkers that this growth is happening, we launched something called mappedinny.com, which is a map of all the tech companies in New York City plotted across the 5 boroughs, and it also allows any company to add itself to the map. We review and then approve based on whether or not they meet our criteria. And you can filter by which companies are hiring. And if you find a company that seems interesting, you can click on that company and go straight to the hiring page. And we think it's a great visual way to show the momentum that we know is happening ourselves, but that perhaps is less visible to see when you're walking around the city. And building on that initiative, we launched something called We Are Made in New York. And We Are Made in New York is an economic development initiative to recognize the growing tech sector in New York City and highlight the fact that we are hiring for so many jobs at over 900 tech companies that are 75% or more based in New York City. This is notable because New York may have a reputation for tech companies as being the place to launch the marketing office or the advertising office or the media arm, but in fact, more than 900 companies, and we believe now it's over 1,000, are 75% or more based here, including their operations and their engineering and truly the systems that make these platforms run. And what We Are Made in New York is at wearemadeinny.com. There are all the resources you need to learn about the tech sector and become involved in the ecosystem, from the basics and email and classes at libraries all the way up through computer science courses free of charge for low-income New Yorkers and students. And in addition to learning, there's a whole range of resources for startups based in New York City to help them grow as well, such as subsidized office space, special grants, access to government contracts, and support for women and minority-owned businesses. It also includes the map, and there are a number of components that provide opportunities for the tech sector to get involved in New York City, whether it's through events or through mentoring and volunteering with with emerging companies or people who may want to join the space. And to tell that story, to make people aware of the website and these resources, we launched the We Are Made in New York creative campaign, which is running in our subways and buses and online right now. And it features actual entrepreneurs from New York City in their office spaces because they're really the best ambassadors to tell that story. They're incredibly dynamic and diverse and very passionate about what they do. And we've been very excited that we also launched that in partnership with New York City's tech leaders. So I think hopefully I didn't go too long, but we can take a few questions now if that makes sense. Thanks.
much, Mrs. Sterne. We'll now proceed to the question period. If it is possible to address your question in English, it would be appreciated. I'm sorry for my accent. We have questions here in Montreal, and we'll have some questions in Quebec City. So we'll start right now with Montreal. Anybody have a question? No question. Yes, madame.
You've mentioned that by 2018, all data must be made available to the public unless there is a reason to keep it confidential. What is the legal basis of this requirement?
It's local law 11 that was actually passed in 2011. But you mean for the confidential piece or the
no, the accessibility.
Yeah, I mean, this was, I'm not sure if I understand the question. Sorry, why did we do this? Or
no, I'd like to know the legislation which does that is at what level?
Yes, local law 11, it was proposed by the city council and signed into law by the mayor in 2011. Yeah, I think that I can get the exact date. It may have been October.
Autre question à Montréal? Oui, monsieur.
Yes, the question I have is technical communication. We watched your entire presentation, but we did not see the PowerPoint presentation. We had a paper copy, and it was difficult to follow. We're talking about communication, facility of communication, and somehow we lost it in the presentation because we didn't see the PowerPoint. We didn't see the images that you were talking about. And it's unfortunate that after talking about so much high technology that we can't even follow you on a PowerPoint presentation.
I agree. I'm sorry to hear that. I had no idea. I've just shown up, and unfortunately, I think we just have some technical, restrictions, and I apologize about that. And you're welcome to see everything on our website, nyc.gov/digital. I'm very sorry to hear that.
Monsieur?
Yes, Mrs. Sterne, I'd like you to give me a few examples of the way you use your technology in your consultation process with the citizens, as far as urbanism, urban projects are concerned. How do you use it? Do you have a few examples? Did you try some things, make some improvement? Let's hear about it.
Sure. So we serve as sort of in-house advisors to the city's agencies and their digital strategies, and we regularly meet with them to help to develop their strategies. And I think the most interesting examples of what you talk about is happening at the agency level, because they're the subject matter experts, and they are also in a position to implement what they're hearing from their constituents. So one example would be bike share. So the city's Department of Transportation is in the process of rolling out a bike share program for the first time in New York City. And in order to get public input into where the public would like to have the bike share kiosks located, they created an interactive map. And the map allows anyone to create a bike share location, to vote on someone else's or endorse their bike share location, or to add a comment, and then to share it on social media. And it was very successful. I think they had over 40,000 individuals interacted with the map and suggested where their bike share locations be included. And this played an important part in the rollout that's happening right now as the bike share locations are happening. And then another example would be we have a platform that we developed in partnership with the Nyc Foundation called Change by Us, which allows the public to suggest ideas for public work such as parks and other initiatives of that sort. And other individuals from their neighborhood can vote for those projects. And the city actually has a number of grants, and they use this platform to distribute the grants for these projects. So that if we see enough traction around an idea for a park or cleanup or painting a mural, we're able to help support, or a compost initiative, for example. The city is providing grant money for those neighborhood projects to happen.
Thank you. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions à Québec?
We do have a question in Quebec City. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Mme. Sterne.
We're just going to walk up to the mic a moment, please.
Yes. My name is Jean-François. I'm with Democracy Ouverte in Quebec City. And I would really like for you to talk to us about the governance that is required to go so fast in a digital plan. How did you manage to get the governance in place? Who are the key players in this? And how did you manage to get the change, the cultural change that is required from the public servant in New York?
So you mean sort of the momentum to get the strategy launched, and
Yep.
how do we structure communications and engagement and launch of these tools?
Yes, and mostly regarding the public servant sector in New York City, the person who work in New York. How did you get them involved?
Well, I mean, the first step when we created NYC Digital was I met with dozens and dozens of people within city agencies who are already doing digital strategy and who had, you know, expert knowledge of their space. Before this, I worked in a startup. I have a tech sector background, and I hadn't, apart from internships with the State Department, I hadn't worked in city government, government at all. So the first step was to come up to speed with what everyone was doing. And in those meetings, the way that we positioned the roadmap was we asked basically two main questions. What have you been trying to launch for, you know, the past 5 years that for some reason you're not able to, and how can we help to be an advocate for you to launch an exciting digital project? And number two, what are you really proud of that you'd like to get a little more recognition for in terms of your digital initiatives? And we really made it clear that we are there to help, and we only wanted to implement a digital strategy if it was in line with their goals. When we meet with city agencies, we have a similar methodology, which is we start with what is the goal of your agency? How do you measure success? Not in a digital sense, but just in a general sense. How do you measure the success of your agency? After they answer that question, we say, okay, well, in order to achieve that goal, where do your constituents live online? And if they don't know, we usually suggest to do some kind of an informal survey, which is very helpful. We always see that our assumptions are challenged when we do these surveys. We find, for example, that low-income New Yorkers use social media and smartphones almost every day. In the survey that we conducted with welfare benefits recipients, over 80% were using a smartphone every day and checking Facebook every day, just to give an example. And then the next question in our consultations, going back to our work with the agency, is we say, what is your capacity internally to commit to this? Because that makes a big difference too. Often it's one person who's wearing 10 different hats already who's going to take on the digital strategy, and we try to caution them about what makes sense. So because we're so aligned with their goals, we really only encourage them to take a step and and embrace a digital strategy if it helps their goals. We're usually in alignment. And we don't really find ourselves in the position of forcing the innovation. One of the biggest surprises when I joined the city is I found out there was so much going on already that just to invest more in the existing initiatives and make the public aware of them was more than enough for us to focus on, and that really created the basis of our roadmap. So ironically, we probably spend more time discouraging people from launching another social media channel because we already have 300, and instead of that we'll say, okay, how can we be more strategic and refine our strategy? Because ultimately, if you're helping someone to do their job more effectively and easier, they're usually going to be in alignment that way.
Merci beaucoup. Il y a ici monsieur et madame qui aimeraient poser une autre question. Monsieur?
Yes, question. Montreal, you may have heard, is almost completely paralyzed by corruption and collusion. Our city hall at Montreal is kind of dissolved and is in a kind of a very difficult state, and we're going into municipal elections. I understand that casual observers look to Albany and New York also as perhaps leaders in corruption and collusion and difficult, lack of transparency. Casual observer might remark that about your state and your city. How does this movement contribute? Can you give us some ideas of how this movement of openness and transparency going to contribute to sort of try and solve some of these problems?
I mean, I I think it all comes down to creating more opportunities for transparency. The more information that is out there, the more power that's put in the hands of the public and residents of your city and of any city. There's more of an ability for, you know, the fourth estate and various opportunities to create checks and balances. And also when agencies and government organizations are aware that all of their data and all of their information will be made public at some point, I think that has an influence at all. That has an influence as a result. So I think that those are some pieces. I think, you know, relatively, New York City is thankfully we have a very transparent government and we have a very effective strategy. It's not necessarily the case everywhere, but I think that in part has been as a result of you know, the mayor's leadership and having a great amount of transparency in all things, and especially in making sure that what's interesting is that it's not just sort of logistics of here's where dog runs are located and Wi-Fi hotspots, but there's a lot of measurement and reporting. And the mayor every year puts out a mayor's management report that shows here's how we shape up. Here's where your taxpayer dollars are going, and he very much has that approach of let's make sure that citizens, that we're constantly reinforcing that we work for the citizens. You know, we work for you, and so you should have access really to everything that's going on in your city. And I think it really comes through. And when you open up the data and you open up your resources, for instance, through an open data platform, then you're empowering you know, the tech sector and third parties to help to make government even more efficient and transparent as well.
Merci, Madame.
So you are explaining, and I think we can see how your role is absolutely very efficient and interesting, and there is a dynamic relationship with the mayor. But we notice also that the role of journalists, because the information is evolving and information is working more with social media. I was wondering, do you change the way you work with journalists, the information industry? Are they turning to you and participating to your project? And do you receive also from citizen help of some local organization? Do they look at you to take their project and making their project happen?
I mean, the sector, the journalism sector and news sector as a whole is changing significantly because of how much more data is available. In our hackathons, we often have journalistic organizations participating. And to give an example of some partnerships during Hurricane Sandy, in the lead up to the hurricane, because we knew that it was approaching the city, we worked with the city's Office of Emergency Management to make sure that we had all of the geographic data about the locations of the city's hurricane evacuation zones available to the public, whether it's to a developer or to the media. And we had several news organizations use that city data to build interactive digital tools that help people to find out if they were in a hurricane evacuation zone. And this was very important because we can't just expect everyone to come to us as the city, everyone to come to our website. We're very much in favor of having a distributed and decentralized approach when it comes to communication. As long as the information is accurate and the data is accurate, however people are getting it is fine with us. So what happened as a result is we had maps created by wnyc.org, by the New York Times, and by Google, and we estimate that we were able to reach 5 to 10 times the number of individuals through those websites because they were able to look at those resources and find out if they're in an evacuation zone or not. And it was just a very exciting moment for us in terms of transparency, and I think the news organizations benefited as well because they had some of the biggest traffic that they'd had in their history. And then beyond that, I'll also mention that one of the other things that happened, to speak about the partnerships with the third parties in the private sector that you asked about, one of the other things that happened during Hurricane Sandy was a local tech organization asked us if they wanted to volunteer and help in the midst of Sandy. Of course, in the midst of an emergency, it's sometimes a little bit too late to figure out how to develop a tech project partnership. So in anticipation of, perhaps future events or emergencies, we created something called Code Corps, in the vein of Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. And the idea is that individuals or organizations that want to volunteer with the City of New York and help us to build life-saving tools for emergencies, they join this organization and this structure ahead of time, and they're legally vetted. Their skill set is assessed. We know what they are comfortable donating in the time of an emergency. And in the event of an emergency, we have these great partners who can help us to build important tools that allow us to assess the situation, conduct recovery and response initiatives, gather feedback, and really provide services to New Yorkers. So Code Corps launched about a couple of months ago, and today we have about 14 partners, including our local universities, Cornell, New York University, Columbia, as well as tech companies like Facebook, Twitter, Tengen, and Etsy. And we, in the absence of an emergency, we're working on projects on an ongoing basis to have this great working relationship so that we can continue to build tools year-round. So that's just a few examples.
Quebec?
We do have another question.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Roberge. I'm president of a tech industry sector association in Quebec City. I have 3 questions, easy questions. The hackathons that you talked about were organized by the city or by citizens or co-organized by the city?
So the hackathons that I mentioned, so reinventnyc.gov, Reinvent Green, and Reinvent Payphones, were organized by the city. But we also participate in dozens of external hackathons every year. Those were just the first time that city government is including hackathons in its own planning process and its own programming process.
Okay. And how many employees do you, in the digital office, do you manage? How many employees does it represent in the whole municipal government?
Well, there's about 200 to 300 people who create digital content every day and have a primarily digital function within the City of New York. But they don't report to me. They report within their own agencies to usually their communications director. But we provide them with training and guidance. And so we do things such as every year we host a one-day conference solely for those employees. We bring in Facebook and Twitter, Google and Tumblr, and we present on best practices for engaging in a public sector approach. We also create guidelines. We have a style guide. We do consultations, and we have workshops.
But in your office, how many people work for you?
And in our office, we're 5 people, so we're small. We're like a startup within city government.
Okay.
But the mayor's office of media and entertainment as a whole is about 100 people, and we share resources across the agency.
Okay. And the last question is mostly related to my role as for the industry, the tech industry. What's the communicational channel you have with the tech industry to keep that link? You said that that's part of your role to keep an open relationship with the tech industry.
Again, with our overall strategy, we come to where they live online, but also in real life. We know that it's important to have these conversations in real life as well. So we're constantly at industry events. Meetups are very big in New York City. The New York Tech Meetup is probably our largest organization. We work very closely with them. We host a wide range of events. And probably do several events every week where we're talking with the tech sector and finding out about their needs and presenting on city resources. We also obviously use social media, Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, both personal and then for the office. And then we do a lot of one-on-one meetings with local startup CEOs. That happens several times a week as well, where we're meeting with these organizations and finding out how we can help them.
Merci. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions ici à Montréal? Monsieur.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Just to follow up on the other questions that were asked, one of the concerns with big data and open data is it's great to open everything up. It's almost like taking a bunch of ingredients and putting them on a table. But after that, if you have inexperienced chefs that are trying to make something out of it, you're not necessarily going to see the full potential. Because it's very new to have all this information out there. It's almost essential that the actors that are putting it out there, if they are being fully transparent, that they will go and put those chefs in place that will show what's really there. So I'm curious if there's anything in your mandate or anything you're actively doing to go beyond just giving it to hackathons, but to actually do some introspection with professionals that manage this as a full-time job.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So that's really the core of our role in the open data sphere in New York City. So we're not responsible for maintaining that platform. We're really responsible for the engagement of the public and encouraging them to use the data in a way that's strategic and that also is accurate. There's a lot of, anytime you're putting data out there, there's agencies are also concerned. They want to make sure that their data is being interpreted correctly and implemented correctly. So just to give a few examples of how we try to shape shape these relationships and make them more constructive is, it's very false to say if you build it, they will come. First of all, they probably won't come. And a developer is also not a typical user. A developer has a different set of what they assume are the common user needs as opposed to what a typical user does. So for what we do, we've learned from each hackathon and challenge. So we do a few things. First, we always make sure that we have subject matter experts on site 24/7 at the hackathons to answer any questions that come up, or perhaps if someone spots an irregularity or an error, we can respond to that and correct it so that they can provide the context, because there's a lot of data and it's important to have that there. On the open data platform itself, we also allow inline commenting so that we can respond and have conversations around specific data points. And then what we've been starting to do every time we have a hackathon is we create a wish list. And the wish list is there to represent what agencies have heard is a major need from their constituents and from the public, to show these are given all of the resources in the world and all the expertise in the world, these are the tools we'd really like to build, and here's the rationale for why. So the wish list, even though we're creating an open opportunity for people to innovate and create new solutions, the wish lists are really there to define the parameters and to create a little more structure. And we find that there's even more creativity when those parameters are in place, because it helps people to focus their energy on solving more specific issues. So those are some of the initiatives that we do, and obviously when the city is participating in hackathons, it will be sure to we'll be sending individuals there to talk about both the technological side and the content side. And finally, I mentioned Code Core before, but one of the components of Code Core is an internal data advisory group called DART, the Data Advisory and Research Task Force. And this is really all the data experts within city government from a wide range of agencies who are the people who know about what the data means and how to operationalize it so that we can really put these solutions into place. And this is the group, it's recently created, but going forward, this group will liaise primarily with our data partners. So they're the ones who you go to when you have a question, when you're trying to find a subject matter expert who can help to explain something. We find that this is really one of the top concerns. And then another thing, we're looking at developing more developer platform tools. So the way that Twitter and companies like Facebook have these developer platforms full of documentation and resources, we're building out some of those as well. Thanks.
D'autres questions à Québec?
We have another question. Thank you.
Hi, Mrs. Sterne. My name is Dominique Olivier. I'm with Play 3 Cabinet Conseil. The question I have for you is coming back to the public consultation part of your presentation. You said you work as an advisory to a different municipal agency. And I was wondering, because we've been experiencing that problem a lot here in Quebec, how do you make sure that the people that are being consulted, that are voting into those different projects that you described, are really the person that are concerned by those projects, meaning residents of the city, for example? How do you make sure, have you developed some kind of an identical numeric identity to be able to identify the people that are intervening in public debate?
So I just want to make sure I have the question accurately. So the question is, when we're meeting with agencies, how do we make sure that the tools and the technologies or the strategies that they're using reflect the actual public needs of the residents?
Exactly.
Okay. I think that's basically that comes into play with the second step of our methodology, which is, where do your constituents live online? And to go back to the example that we have with Human Resources Administration, so the city's Human Resources Administration, which provides all the public benefits to low-income New Yorkers, they were very interested in developing a tech strategy. But we didn't necessarily know where their constituents, quote unquote, lived online. We didn't know what the platforms they were using or the devices or the technology. So when we asked them that question, they didn't know, and they said, well, what if we administered a survey? And they distributed, I believe, 6,000 to 8,000 surveys to their clients across the city of New York because they have physical spaces. It was a small sheet of paper like this. And it was not scientifically done, but they were able to do it over the course of a couple of weeks, and it cost them nothing. And they logged a significant enough sample of the responses to get a good response. So I think they actually looked through about 1,200 of them to analyze the responses, and through that they found out they asked their constituents. They said, would you like to receive news from an email, from a text message, through social media? How often do you check social media? How often do you check, do you have a smartphone? Do you not have a smartphone? What are the tools you use? Do you use it to browse the internet? So these were all the questions that they had, and it really challenged a lot of the assumptions. So perhaps if we had assumptions that low-income households were not using smartphones, those were totally thrown out, because 80% or more were using a smartphone every day and using it to browse the internet. And so that really was an eye-opener, and of course that corroborates with a lot of research now, because we know that if you don't have broadband at home, you're probably using a mobile device to get on the internet. So that was one step, and many of them said they would be interested in receiving the text message. And so that helped to set up the initial strategy. As a result of that, that agency launched a texting program called Text to Work, which grows by about 10% every week, where people can sign up to get alerts when there are job openings that are that are matching their subject matter areas of interest or their expertise. So they get one text message a day. It's the address and time to go apply for a new job. And they're again using data to drive this process in the communications office, because they look at, okay, when we post this message, how do people respond? Do we get people who are opting out, who are canceling their subscription, or are we starting to see people responding? And the engagement has been really fantastic, and they now have a new challenge, which is that people are responding to the text messages so much, and they have more questions, that they're devoting more and more resources to this because it's working. But I think that's one example, and I think the best thing to do is to ask the constituents what they want, and help that to drive your strategy.
That is very interesting, if I may. So what I understand is that you use traditional means of communication. Would it be surveys on actual papers, or radio? You talked about the Made in New York subway campaign, for example. So you have to use those tools before you can do the digital step, if I understand.
Right, because if they're not online, you have to first find out how are your constituents communicating and finding information, and then it's all about having a user-centric strategy. How do we put the user at the center, the individual at the center, and build the strategy around their needs?
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sterne. We know that you have to leave at 1:45, but we were wondering if you have time for one more last question.
Sure. I'd be happy to do one last question. Thanks.
Is there any question here in Montreal? Yes, sir?
Yes, again, my name is Nyc Sterne with the Urban Research Group in Montreal, GRUHM. If you want to visit our website, you'll see type of interventions that we do. In Montreal, we talked a lot about the corruption and collusion, but one thing we find that is propagated a lot is a fear, an element of fear. I believe in New York you had similar problems with collapses of various overpasses and whatever. But the fear of infrastructures here in Montreal is becoming so great that instead of developing strategies to overcome the fear, we're developing strategies of augmenting the amount it's going to cost society to eliminate these fears. In your various methods of communications, we tend to have difficulty of trying to communicate other points of view other than what's publicly announced by government officials to demonstrate that in a lot of cases what the civil society, société civile, want to express, it's very difficult to come across. Even with all these technologies, we tend to find that there's no backbone on which we can have open dialogues on certain situations. When you're looking at $40 billion to replace a highway system in Montreal, there's no room left for public transport, social housing, or anything else for the like. And so this is why I think we have to discuss really what we have to invest in the way of a strategic, and how the message can be discussed openly without having decisions made without our prior involvement.
So, and what is the question?
The question is basically how can we formulate a system like you have, so-called, for wider communication, to be able to transmit certain points of views which are difficult to do otherwise.
I think and I apologize, I'm really not an expert or informed enough in the situation in Montreal, and you know, unfortunately, we do not have the same issues regarding infrastructure in New York City. But I think just since you kept mentioning the word fear, I think one approach that has been very helpful for us has been to frame the conversation in a constructive in a constructive sense, so that you're collaboratively coming up with a solution, so that you're empowering citizens to get involved in their government. And so one of the reasons why we've seen things like reinvent payphones is helpful is because instead of there are mixed opinions about payphones, public payphones, because they're changing. People use them less. Sometimes they're maybe not the most ideal thing to have around. But instead of just having the debate be around that, instead we framed it as, let's reinvent payphones. Let's imagine a future where we're really proud of our telecommunications infrastructure, that it's beautiful, that it's well designed, that it works very well. And I think, you know, doing something similar around whatever the other topic is, you know, perhaps a hackathon or a meetup where you're talking constructively about this is what it could look like, and inspiring people from all walks of life, internally and externally to government, to imagine that collaboratively can have, I think, sometimes more positive effects in terms of getting the wheels turning and moving forward.
Well,
great.
Thank you
so much.
very much. Mrs. Sterne, it was very interesting to hear you, and I'm speaking for Montreal, and I'm sure that it can be for Quebec also. It was very interesting, and it helped us a lot to make a clearer opinion. So thank you, and you do a nice job, and we hope that someone here will take the same the same kind of job here. Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you very much for the opportunity.